What's going on, guys? Welcome to another tank build video. Today we're going to be looking at my Sunspire Arcanist Main Tank build. This is the setup that I ran in my most recent Godslayer prog. It works really well, it's extremely tanky and amazing on sustain. The build is definitely suitable for Godslayer, obviously. It's also absolutely fine to run if you're just doing the hard mode without doing the Trifecta, and it's also going to work just fine for the regular veteran content as well. Maybe a couple of things you could change up if you don't need the speed in terms of some of the strategies and the skills that we're running in order to achieve that speed. But for the most part, you can definitely run it as it is in this video. So just before we get into the build, just a reminder that this video is part of a series where I'm going through a number of tank builds for different trials, dungeon content for different classes. Please do leave a like on the videos, please subscribe to the channel, and as always, leave a comment if you have any questions for me. So my Arcanist is a red guard. I've chosen red guard because of the stamina sustain that it brings mostly. Other good options are Imperial, Nord, Breton, otherwise basically anything works quite well, but they're probably the best tanking races that you can choose. In terms of my food, I'm running bullet sugar skulls. You've got two options. You can either go with this that I normally run, which gives you the max resources. So you're going to get max health, stam, mag, and you're also going to get health recovery as well. The other option is you go with a recovery food. The two options are Jewels of Misrule, which is your cheaper option. Otherwise you can go with Orzorga's Smoked Bear Hunch. The only difference between them really is this one gives you a bit more health, and it also gives you an element of health recovery as well. Jewels of Misrule doesn't have the health recovery, but it is a fair bit cheaper. So, try one of these recovery foods, try Bullet Sugar Skulls, and go with whichever one kind of works better for you, but this is my personal choice. Onto the pots, I'm running Tri-Stat pots, which are pretty standard for a tank. You can either run the Crown Tri-Stat pots or the player crafted ones. My attributes, I'm running 55 into health and 9 into mag. What I'm basically doing here is aiming for 40k health. So put all your gear on, put all your glyphs, your food, etc. And then go into your attributes last. Aim for about 40k health. You can tank with lower. However, 40k is a nice sort of target that I personally like to go for. And then I'm using the final 9 into mag just to bring that up a little bit, make sure it's over the 20k mark. My stamina is already high enough. So my Mundus stone that I'm running is the Atronach. This is pretty standard for a tank, to be honest. I don't normally change away from this, so I just like it for the extra mag recovery. This is the choice that I will usually use, especially for trials, and I use it for dungeons as well, actually. So in terms of gear, the sets that you run are really going to depend on your team setup. You've got quite a few different options you can run. So in terms of the actual sets that I'm running Turning Tide, I'm running Sack Seal, and Archdruid as the monster set. Now, the reason I'm running Turning Tide and Archdruid is because we don't have Necros in our group. We only have one for running EC. If you've not got Necros in your group, the best way to get your major vulnerability is from running Turning Tide, which whenever you block, you gain the Flowing Water buff. When you get that and you bash, you will apply major vulnerability to anything kind of in front of you in this 5x10 meter line. Archdruid gives the same buff, but it's procs from a heavy attack. So what you'll be doing is you'll be using Turning Tide, and then when the major vulnerability drops off, then you'll do your heavy attack on Archdruid in order to reapply that buff or debuff. That's true because we haven't got Necros in our group. If you have, you're not going to want to run these two sets. And the other thing that I'm running is Sack Seal, and normally Sack Seal will go on your off tank, and the reason for that is because your off tank will a lot of the time be a Necro, and because they're not going to be using Warhorn on the Necro, the way for them to give you the same buff, which is Major Force, is by using Sack Seal. So whenever they proc their Colossus ultimate on the back bar, they'll proc the Sack Seal buff, giving Major Force. Now the reason I'm running it on my Arcanist Main Tank is because I'm not running Warhorn. I'm actually going to be running the Arcanist ulti, which is Resonating Glyphic, and I'm using this because it gives a nice bit of burst damage to my team. So whenever I use this on my back bar, I'm going to be proccing Sack Seal, which is giving Major Force to my group, and instead our off tank is using Warhorn. They're not a Necro, so they're not running Sacks. Instead they're running Pearlescent Ward, which is normally the set that you'll run on a main tank if you're not doing this particular circumstance that me and my team are doing. So the overall sets are Turning Tide, Sack Seal, and Archdruid. But again, if you're going to be running Warhorn and not the Arcanist ulti, then you can switch Sack Seal to Pearlescent Ward with your off tank. If you have Necros in the group, you don't need to run Turning Tide. You can instead swap this out for. You've got a couple of different options. One that worked quite well for us was Imperium. This basically just gives damage shields to you and your group. It's probably best if you're running something like the Hardmode or even the regular VSS and you're learning. You don't necessarily need speed. You can swap to Imperium just for that safety net. So it's quite a nice option. There are other options as well besides Turning Tide and Imperium. But for me and my team, this is the setup that we're running. In terms of the traits and the enchants as well, so I'm running Infused Absorb Stamina on my front bar. You can also go Decisive as well, but because I'm using an ultimate that's relatively low cost compared to the rest of the people in my sort of ultimate rotation, it's only 200 compared to Warhorn, which is 250. I get that ultimate quite readily available, so I didn't need Decisive in this case. So I'm running Infused with an Absorb Stam enchant. If you're running Warhorn, probably go Decisive instead. I've got Well Fitted and Tri-Stack Glyph on the back bar. To be honest, I probably wouldn't run Well Fitted. I would go with either Divines or Sturdy here. The reason I'm using Well Fitted, honestly, is just because that's what I had available. But yeah, if you're going to make it from scratch, make Sturdy or Divines. The back bar, I'm running Crusher Infused on my Frost Staff, which is pretty standard for tank, so basically always go for that, and that's to apply the Crusher enchant to the enemies that you're attacking. This is just going to reduce their resistances. On my head and shoulders, I'm running, head, shoulders, and all my body pieces besides the greaves and the chest. I'm running Sturdy. I'm running Sturdy and not Divines because I'm basically running the Atronach with mag recovery glyphs on my jewelry to help with my mag sustain, and then I'm running Sturdy on my body pieces to help with my stam sustain. I am perma blocking quite a lot in VSS because I've got some big ad pulls. I've got the dragons, so mostly I want to be having Sturdy just to help with my stamina sustain, essentially. The reason for the 2 reinforced on the chest and legs is just to get me to the resistance cap. So if I buff up with my minor resolve, my major resolve, and use the Arcanist Taunt, which gives me my resistances as well, you can see I'm just over the resistance cap of 33,700 on the front bar, and I'm a little bit lower on the back bar, but that's okay. I'm only just about 1k under the cap. My other traits, so I'm running Tri-Stack Glyphs on the big pieces, so that's the legs, the chest, the helm, and the shield. And then on the smaller pieces, which are the shoulders, the waist, the hands, and the feet, I'm running health glyphs. You can run Tri-Stack Glyphs on these as well. It's probably the better option if you've got plenty of Kuta and Hokkaido. Go with Tri-Stat as well, but max health works absolutely fine otherwise. And then my jewelry, I'm going in Infused Mag Recovery. You can run Harmony. The reason I'm not is because as a main tank in VSS, I'm often not getting access to a lot of synergies, and so I'm just sticking with Infused here, and it's just giving me a bit of an extra boost on my mag recovery glyphs that I have on my jewellery. So in terms of my skills, I'm running Silver Leash. The reason I'm running this is because it's basically my ad control. So I'm going to be chaining in ads on all of the ad pools. The off tank is going to be helping with this as well. You don't need to run this on any of the bosses except for the second boss, the fire boss, Yolnekrin. You run this mostly if you're doing Godslayer, but you can also do it on just a regular hard mode as well, depending on the method of the fight that you are choosing to do. The reason you run it on the second boss is because you chain in the flame atros under the dragon, and what that's meaning is that your DDs don't have to get off the dragon to kill the flame atros. It also means that when they die, the lava that they leave behind is under the boss and it's not hurting anyone. On regular VSS, you absolutely don't need to do that. On the hard mode, when you don't have this time constraint, you also don't need to do that. You can have your off tank chain them to the back, the DDs can turn around and kill them. But if you're comfortable as a main tank, even on the hard mode, I would stick with this method. Put Silver Leash on, taunt the Atros, walk under the dragon, or roll under the dragon, chain the Atros in, let them die to your DD's cleave, and then roll back out and continue. But for the most part, you're only needing Silver Leash on the ad pools and the second boss. I pretty much keep it on all the time through laziness. I don't need another skill on the ice boss, so I just leave it on. And for the last boss, to be honest, there's no reason to not change this to Revealing Flare, which will just give you major protection. You're not going to need the chains on the last boss, so running this is probably the better option overall. I'm running Zenas in Power and Disc. On the first two bosses, you're not going to be applying this much to your group. The reason is they're going to be stood on the other side of the dragon to you, or in hard mode you're actually going to be stood near the back of the room, so you're just not going to be applying this to your group, but you can still run it for your own resources. Instead, it's probably worth having a Arcanist DD run this, or a healer, on the first two bosses. On the last boss, if you look at my point of view video, I do step into the group and use this pretty consistently, but for the first two, better putting it on a DD and just run this for yourself. Then we've got Rune Guard of Still Waters. This is giving us our minor resolve, so 3k of our resistances. It's also giving us minor protection for 20 seconds, and whenever you're damaged below 50% health, you get a nice 13k heal as well. Your main burst heal and damage shield, Impervious Rune Ward, which is a really important one on the Arcanist. Whenever you use it, you get a nice massive damage shield, about 31.5k damage. When it's absorbed as well, you can also heal yourself whenever you take damage, and this is going to give you an amount of health per crux that you have available at that time. So if you have all three crux available, you're going to get just over 12k, 12.5k health as well. So it's a really nice skill to use. Then we've got our main taunt on the Arcanist, which is Runic Sunder. We don't use Pierce Armor on an Arcanist because we have this one. As well as applying the taunt, this is also going to give you armor back. You steal it from the one that you apply the taunt to. It also applies minor maim for 15 seconds, so it's a really nice one to run. And then our ultimate is going to be Barrier. We're running this mostly for the mag recovery that we get from the passive on the support skill line, which is Magicka Aid. On the back bar, we are going to be running Elemental Blockade. This is what we're running for proccing our Crusher enchant. So we'll keep this down all the time on our primary target, which for the most part will be bosses. When it comes to the first boss, you're going to be a bit out of range, so normally someone else will run this. Usually probably one of the healers, or if not the off tank can run it. But for the second boss and the last boss, it'll be your responsibility. You can just keep it on for the first boss unless there's anything else you want to slot, but I personally don't. Razor Caltrops, this is our main source of major breach, because we don't have that on our front bar taunt like you do on other classes. we need to apply Major Breach somehow. So we run this to do that. So you can swap this out for Ellie Drain on bosses. It's got a much longer duration. It won't have such a toll on your stam sustain, but I personally just keep it on because it allows me to apply it to adds during the fight as well. So for example, on the ice boss, I can apply this to the storm atros. On the fire boss, it applies to the fire atros after I've chained them in. And on the last boss, I would definitely run caltrops so that you can major breach all of the adds on the add phases between where the dragon flies as well. So take your pick between Ellie Drain and this on bosses, but I personally stick with it. Then your minor breach is coming from your Crooksweaver armor. So whenever you use this and take damage, it's going to apply minor breach to whatever has damaged you. This is also your main source of major resolve on the Arcanist. So on each class, you have your main source of major resolve. DKs have hardened armor, or may sometimes use balance. Wardens have expensive frost cloak. You've got beckoning armor on the Necro. On the Arcanist, you're running this as your major resolve. So you want to keep this on all the time. It's going to give you 6k resistances, which will definitely be a large chunk of getting you towards your resistance cap. And on top of those two things, it is also a crux generator for you. So when you take damage while you have this on, you're also going to be gaining crux, which, as we saw from our front bar shield and heal, this is going to give us a much bigger boost whenever we take the heal from that. Then we're running Rune of Colourless Pull. This is a really nice buff skill on the Arcanist. So this is going to give us minor vulnerability and minor brittle to whatever we apply it to. So we want to try and keep this up on bosses. Sometimes you're going to be a little bit out of range on the ice boss when you're range tanking. So if you're doing hard mode, but for the most part you can just sort of step in and use it. Just be aware when you're in range of the dragon to use this, you're also in range of a breath as well. So pick your moments to use it so you don't accidentally get the dragon to do an ice breath at the wrong time. And then finally our back bar taunt is Frost Clench. You can run Inner Rage as well. For the most part I do run this. It gives major maim to whatever you apply it to. It is a little bit more expensive in Inner Rage, I believe, but it's, use either. Either's fine. And then as we mentioned before, our back bar ultimate that we're using is Resonating Glyphic. The reason we're running this is because we're basically just using it for a big boost to our burst damage. So whenever you put it down, it's something that's physically there. It's an attackable sort of add, if you like. Your DDs damage it, so you want to place it within their sort of line of sight. Usually it'll be on the boss within the hitbox that they're attacking, or the ad pools that they're attacking at the time. And then when they do damage to it, it's fairly easy to completely kill it. And when that happens, they get the maximum benefit from this, which is going to give them 200 weapon and spell damage. So this is the reason we're running that. Our other supports, so our healers and our off-tank, they're going to be running Warhorns in this case. And again, that's the reason why we're running the Sax heal, so we proc this with Sax. If I go back to my gear on this, because we have it on the back bar, you really could be having Sax heal Ice Staff and Sax heal Jewelry, and then run Turning Tide on the body, because we don't need to double bar Sax heal, but I don't really personally find any of the two item set pieces like Vatishrun or Maelstrom or anything. I don't find it particularly useful on the Arcanist in Sunspire, so that's the reason I'm not doing that. If you're on a DK tank, I would definitely run Sax Seal on the back bar, as opposed to having it double barred, just because your ultimate's always going to be on the back bar, and that allows you to run a 2 item set piece like probably the Master's Sword and Board on the front bar, which will give you health back every time you use your melee taunt. However, on the Arcanist, we use the Arcanist taunt, and for that reason we don't benefit from Masters. we don't really need the extra resources that we get from the Maelstrom and the Vatishran. We're just not going to be using it for Sunspire. So for that reason, I'm double barring Turning Tide, and I'm also double barring Saxheal by having it on the body and jewellery. So finally, we're going to do CP. I have the standard blue tank CP, Ironclad, reducing the direct damage taken, Enduring Resolve, reducing your damage over time, Duelist Rebuff, which reduces the damage you take from single target attacks, and finally Unassailable, which reduces the damage from AoEs. The red CP, I'm running Boundless Vitality for the max health, I'm running Fortified for the armour, which is getting me to my resistance cap as we've looked at, and then I'm running Bastion and Shield Master, which is increasing the effectiveness of those damage shields which we're running, and also reduce the cost of them as well. So they're basically going to boost, or the Bastion is going to boost your main heal / shield on the Arcanist. So that's pretty much it for this build. I found the setup to be ridiculously OP in Sunspire. It just makes it feel really easy, in all honesty, so absolutely give the build a go. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Please do like, please do subscribe to the channel as well, and yeah, leave a comment if there's anything that you want to ask me. So yeah, thanks everyone, and I'll see you in the next one.